everybody back. Third and final panel for today. It's being moderated by Mr. Frank Laski, who's a he's an attorney, and he's going to have panelists present by Tia Nelis, Barbara Ransom, and Mary Falvey. So, Frank, please take away, sir. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for putting us at the end of the day. We have an exciting and panel here. I'm so privileged to be able to be part of this panel. And before I introduce them, I'm going to tell you, I think we have maybe, I would go to maybe 120, maybe 150 years experience among the boxes here. And I'm not going to tell about all the panelists, but I just want to mention when David Hutt mentioned the Belchertown case in 1974 in Massachusetts, I happened to be in that case, so you can do the math. We have inclusive education, closing the gaps. Now, TASH has been fighting for inclusive education and nurturing it along for since the right to education first started, about 50 years. And still, this panel wouldn't have any problem finding the gaps. There still are some really important gaps. But given the timing, we've decided to focus on one important gap that I think deserves much more attention from TASH. So even we may not have the answers for you today, but we want you to start to think about it, and particularly people who've had experience going through transition, going through education, valuable education in elementary and secondary schools, and then what is their post-school experience, in particular in regard to higher education. We often talk about transition.
That shouldn't be.
Talk about transition, and we talk about employment. But do we talk enough about preparing children with disabilities, youth with disabilities, for higher education and participation in higher education to enrich their lives after school? So that's going to be our topic, and we have some really good panelists. We're going to start with Tia Nelis, and Tia, as you know, is coordinator of self-advocacy engagement at TASH. She's many years director of policy and advocacy, and has many years of experience as a self-advocate and an advocate for others. Both in, I think Tia was founded and maybe the first president of Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, a leader in the group, People First in Illinois, and most recently appointed by President Biden as to serve on his committee for people with intellectual disabilities. Most important to our panel today, Tia has experienced and worked through experiencing higher education, both the barriers and the benefits. So we're looking forward to her contribution. Then we have Dr. Mary Falvey. Mary has been the leader in TASH for as long as I can remember, and was founder and first president at CalTASH. I think she now enjoys emeritus position as professor of special education at Cal State in LA. And you know, Mary's vision of inclusive education, inclusive life, inclusive society, has always guided her career and guided us, so that you know, inclusion has been at the center of her teaching and her advocacy. And then we have Barbara Ransom. What do I have to say more about Barbara except that she was a recipient of this great award that we're honoring Mike Lottman with today, I think in 2019. One of my greatest pleasures and privileges of my career as being a colleague of Barbara's in Philadelphia and with TASH and throughout the years. I just want to say a couple of things before we start. And I think the question, I've sort of framed the question. Can we advance inclusion? That's our topic. Can we advance inclusion in post-secondary education, and particularly in higher education, based on our own experience, our research, our training that we've done in advancing inclusion in primary and secondary education? In other words, do we have to invent the wheel again? Don't we know some advocacy techniques that might work when children are, when youth are in that transition period? In the work that TASH did after the right to education in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, laid the research base and demonstrated a couple of important things. One, that all kids can benefit from regular class experiences. Those benefit most who have access and participate in the general curriculum. And secondly, we showed that people with disabilities, when properly educated, can be competitive, can be productive, can enjoy independent lives. And the corollary was that we also showed segregated education doesn't provide anything, and also useless segregated workshops, day programs, idleness does not produce anything either. In 2004, when the transition provisions of the federal law came into place, they were largely based on what TASH had done in the 80s and the 90s. So I start this with not knowing what to do, certainly not knowing what to do, but with a positive frame that the same energies we brought in advocacy, in teaching, in training, in public policy, can be applied to this one very, very important goal. That is a post-school life for youth with disabilities that includes what we know is a great gift and benefit of higher education. And I include a whole range of, we won't go into that, range, community colleges, dual programs, so forth and so on. But I want to enter this with trying to answer that question without thinking we don't know anything about what to do. We do. And I'm going to start that off with Tia. Tia, will you just tell us about your experience? And I want to welcome questions from the chat from the very beginning as the speakers speak. If you have a question, just put it up in the chat and we'll get to it. Particularly individuals who have been thinking about higher education and also may have had some experiences too that are helpful. I'm going to turn it over to Tia now.
So thank you all, of course, for inviting me to be a part of the panel. I'm excited to share a little bit about my school experience. I want to start with first high school, wanting to go to college and go on to college. My high school experience going on to college, my Department of Rehab counselor asked me if what I wanted to do after school. So that was transition, but I didn't know what the meeting was about, first of all. And I was just told that it was a meeting to talk about what do you want to do after you get done with high school. So that was my senior year. And I told her that I wanted to be a child care worker. And she said, well, do you have enough money to go to college? And at that time, my parents weren't able to afford going to college. And then she asked me if I wanted to go to work at a shelter workshop. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, it's like factory work. And I said, well, I don't want to work in a factory. So then she said, well, you can stay at home, collect SSDI, and watch TV. And that's what she expected me to do with my life. I was lucky enough, though, that I had people who believed that I can do more in life, because some people with disabilities don't have other people on their side. So it starts with believing in the person and being able to believe in yourself then. I wanted to go to college, but my problem was I couldn't pass the SAT, ACT testing scores that most colleges require for you to go to school there. I did find some colleges that would accept people with disabilities to do that, but some of those colleges were like life skills experience. I don't go to school to make my bed. I don't go to school to like clean my house. I go to school to learn and have a career and to be able to do a job like everybody else. So I didn't want to go to school like that. I did find a school that was wanting to accept people with disabilities without SAT scores. And that school had me doing things that I'll never be a part of because I worked full time. They wanted me to be a part of their clubs, and I didn't want to join an ABC, Alpha, Beta, whatever you call it, club, because I'm working full time and I don't want to do that. So I still had to do some of those other courses. By the time I would have gotten my diploma in that school, it would have been on my grave. Unfortunately, they didn't help support me in a way that I needed to be supportive. But later on, I found Syracuse University. Now, I'm only going to share, I'm a much older person to be going back to college, but that's because I couldn't find the supports that I needed to go to college in the first place. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this, how important it is that I think there still needs to be more laws out there to help make that happen for people with disabilities when they're younger. We shouldn't have to wait this long for us to have the college experience. I went to Syracuse University, but I had to advocate for me to be a part of that school. And it so happened that I went to school during the pandemic. But before the pandemic, I had to do a lot of advocating and convincing them, A, that I lived in Washington, D.C., and would you take a person with a disability from another state? And B, they never did online schooling for anybody. So that was a real a challenge for me to meet with them for quite a while to be able to convince them that they should take that chance. So I had to do a lot of advocating, be able to do that. But thank God that they were a school that said, we're willing to take that chance and give you the opportunity to come to do Syracuse online, and you don't have to do it in person. And we can give you the supports, and we could also figure out how you can make it easier, a little bit more affordable for you to go to school, because I didn't have that kind of money to pay for school. So we did it online. They never knew how to do it online, support somebody from a distance, but we figured it out. There were some ups and downs, like always. When you register for school, they always ask, what dorm am I in? And I'm like, I'm not in a dorm. They look at me like I was crazy because they never did that before. And I met before the pandemic, I would meet with my teachers. I had a friend in Syracuse, so I would go stay with her, meet with my teachers, and talk about the supports that I would need for school, so that when I went back, they would know how to support me in that class. Then the pandemic hit, and they were like, how are they going to support people with disabilities online? And my teachers were lucky because they started talking about how they supported me online. So they were helping teach the other teachers how to do that. And I had the experience of one of the things that I liked about Syracuse also is they asked me if I wanted to get a degree in disability studies, because that's what I was taking, or I wanted a certificate. And the reason why they asked that is because, well, she gave me the choice and gave me information about both of them. If I would have taken the degree, it would have cost a whole lot more money. And at the age that I am, it wouldn't really make a difference on my resume. So, or you can get a certificate in disability studies and it still looks good on your resume and pay a lot less. But she said, I support you in either way you want to go. You know, and she didn't pressure me on either way. She just gave me the facts about both of them and gave me the choice, an informed choice about that. And I made the choice. I made the choice to go for a certificate, but I also, it was very interesting, the classes that I went in, because a lot of the students that I went into the classes was really interesting. They talked a lot better about people with disabilities than they did a long time ago. And they were talking about discrimination and things like that. And they were like, well, how could you say that about people with disabilities when a while ago they would talk about things for people with disabilities and they would agree that, oh, you can't do that, or people with disabilities shouldn't be allowed to work in that, or things like that. But it was a lot more, the conversation was a lot different. So I think that that was really great. And then I could bring my life experience into the classroom, because these people are going to be working with people with disabilities at the jobs and careers that they're taking, especially disability studies. Some were going to be special education teachers. And I had a chance to influence them before they get into all the book stuff that it says about disability. I had to talk to them about my life experiences and about how people with disabilities need to be treated, and let them ask questions. And we had a really great conversation. And I believe that, you know, there's other schools out there that can do the same thing as Syracuse is doing. If they have the belief in people with disabilities can go to school and go to college and have careers, they could do those things and help other people with disabilities. I just want to make a difference. And still talking at Syracuse when they asked me to do a presentation, or hopefully we're working on a grant to make sure that other people with disabilities could come to Syracuse at a younger age. So they can start this at a younger age. They can go for a career. They have people that interact with people to support people during the school. I wasn't there in the classroom, but if you're there at Syracuse, Inclusive U, they have study partners. They include everybody in everything, the athletic stuff. They go and observe. They have internships at jobs. Those experiences that everybody else at college has that doesn't have a disability, people with disabilities get to do that. They can live on campus if they want. It's not like segregated and you can't live on campus and you have to come. You can live on campus if you want. I hoping that, you know, more people with disabilities get a chance to go to schools like that are inclusive, and not going to school to make your bed and to do your laundry and learn how to do all those things, brush your teeth. You should be learning that at home, not at school. And not just life skills. Life skills are important, but school is also important to get a job, to get a career that you want, to be a part of the community, and of course, to get a paycheck. I had that opportunity to talk. My first presentation on self-advocacy was to talk to 150 Department of Rehab counselors. And I was nervous about it, but I said, you know, I wish my Department of Rehab counselor was in the audience right now, because I didn't listen to her, and I have my paycheck, and I bet I make more money than she does. So I'm hoping that other people will give us a chance to make that happen. IDEA is so important. That gives opportunities for people, young people, to have that opportunity in school. We have a lot of good things that are happening out there. People are running their meetings at school. They're being included, but we still have a long way to go. You know, we have Think College, but you can think college, but you can only think it if you can't pass the SAT, ACT testing. That's in a lot of places. Then you can think about college all you want, but you can't get in the door. So those are some of the things that, you know, accessibility is more than also getting in the door. It's about the supports that you need and helping make the transition easier from, you know, from each of the things that you want to do. So I think that there is more opportunities out there, and places like Syracuse can do that. And they're a big popular school and they have a lot of students. Then other schools can do it too. Other universities can make that happen for people. I hope we get another grant at Syracuse, so that I want to be a part of designing more students to be able to come to Inclusive U if that's where they want to come to in the future, so that they have an opportunity to not have to wait so long, to not have to sit at home and think, I'll never get to go to college. I'll never get to participate in that like my brothers or my sisters because I have a disability. I don't want that happen to anybody else. So that's why I believe that all the work that TASH is doing and all the work that other places are doing to include people with disabilities at a young age, you should be doing this and thinking about it when they're in grade school, not waiting to high school. And teaching them self-advocacy skills to speak up for what's important to them at a very young age. And that's what's going to make a difference in the world. So I thank all of you that's on the panel, because I know all the work that you've done to help make kids be able to make that a possibility. And I hope in the future that more kids with disabilities won't have to think twice about advocating for what they want and where they want to go and what they want to do in the future.
Thanks. Thanks, Tina. Tia. It is amazing to have your experience, and that sets off so many thoughts. I was just thinking of your last statement about preparing early and remembering our good mentor, Gunnar Dibwad. He said about early intervention, he said, early intervention, why does it come so late? And I think we could say the same thing about transition. Why does it come so late? One of the things we talk about, all the barriers that are put up, that we see are being put up or look like being put up by the institutions of higher education, when really we should be looking at ourselves and say, what should we be doing? Should we send any youth with a potential for higher education out there to try to figure out from the admission requirements, the testing requirements, and all the supports that kids now get in terms of finding the right place, in terms of benefiting from all the opportunities that are available, not necessarily just getting that degree, but having what we've pushed again in lower education, high expectations. Every IEP is supposed to be developed with high expectations, challenging. And I think I'm afraid if I don't get into this, but I'm afraid if I looked at a lot of the boxes on IEPs where during transition time, when they talk about higher education, there's going to be a check mark there, or it's going to be bypassed. We've done if you look at it historically, we've done a great job in terms of moving into the employment sector. It's a long way to go. That's a gap too. But if you compare it to what we've been doing for the other aspects of post-secondary life, I think there's something there. So I'm going to turn to Mary, and I hope Mary's going to sort of address what we can do as educators, before we get to the point where somebody like Tia is out on her own trying to figure out how to get into Syracuse or someplace else.
Well, I think, Frank, I was supposed to go before Mary.
All right.
Is
Then
that right, Mary?
you can tell us how we can advocate for that. All
Yes,
right.
Barbara goes before me.
All right.
I'm following a hard act there, I really am, because what I have to say I hope brings this together in some kind of reasonable way. My issue always starts with the law. I'm a lawyer, so of course I start with the law. One of the things that's really important is that when a state agrees to provide public education to its children, as a matter of law, the way it provides that public benefit must be done equitably so that all children can receive the benefit. When Public Law 94-142 was passed in 1974, there were battles across the nation for the right of children with disabilities to receive public education in schools with their brothers, sisters, and neighborhood peers. That public education extends not only to the school K through 12 or pre-K through 12, but it also extends to the college and university environment. Some schools, and you'll see that I had to change my own language around because I said allowed, but they still allow children into their doors, but often exclude them from entering classrooms with their peers or accessing the general education grade level curriculum. They also exclude them from being part of the college life. Fortunately, Tia explained to us that there are colleges that are becoming more and more aware and opening up their eyes. It surprises me all the time to know that many people believe that it's in the Constitution, we have a right to education. No, our founding fathers did not, in their wisdom, give us a right to education in the Constitution. Not until the North prevailed over the South, sorry Southerners, but that's the way it really did work, did the country recognize the need for laws to protect citizens from the overreach of state laws. We had the Bill of Rights did not apply to the states, so the states could do what they wanted to do. Not until the 14th Amendment, and that's one of the good things that came out of the atrocities of slavery, was the 14th Amendment that gave equal protection. And the 14th Amendment gave equal protection so that it says in pertinent part, no state shall deny to any person, not any citizen, any person within its jurisdiction, the equal protection of the laws. The Equal Protection Clause ensures that state laws are fair and treat everybody similarly situated alike. Now that's my speech in terms of the law, okay? I want to talk a little bit about the fight for any child's right to go from birth to a happy life after the K through 12 experience. It begins with the parents. And I have found that for many parents, what I would do and what they would do sometimes is different. I can't put myself in their position, but I can help them learn how to fight. And I think when I came into working in the area of disability rights, I had to recognize the fact that all parents don't understand how important it is for them to have a voice. I have found clients that I've worked with who would never tolerate some of the behavior that their child with a disability is subjected to. They wouldn't stand by and let that happen to their child who didn't have a disability. And I've had to confront parents on that. So I began to look at it a different way. We have to, we as advocates, we as lawyers, we as social service providers, we as agencies, whatever we are, we have to remind parents that they are the child's first teacher. They are the child's initial role model. No child can get too much attention. The sooner they know how important they are, the better. Parents must learn to be a part of the remedy for helping to prevent exclusions from school. And when I talk about exclusions, I'm talking about suspension. I'm talking about expulsions. I'm talking about not letting the door open up to let these children in, or closing the door once they get in and pushing them out. I'm talking about segregation. I'm talking about something that I just learned about after 35 years of working in this business, adjudications, and other forms of branding that will make it impossible for their baby to reach her full potential. Do you know that if a child has getting financial aid for college, that will stop that child from getting a scholarship, a financial scholarship to college that's paid for with public money. So we have to step in there early because there are so many handicaps. Tell the parents to take care to ensure that their child grows in mind, body, and spirit from the moment she leaves their body. Teach the parents how to fight for the child, when to request an evaluation to get them into the system. Because if you come into the system with an IEP, that IEP can give you some advantages that you might not otherwise have. It also can give you some disadvantages when it comes to the opportunity to go to school and continue your education after school. You can't get into the military if you have an IEP. They will not accept you. I didn't know that. All of these things I've learned as I've grown in the profession. When parents notice any changes in the child's behavior that might suggest that something is, even suggest that there's something interfering with his school behavior performance, tell them to schedule a meeting with the child's pediatrician first. As you explain to the doctor what is happening in the school setting. The pediatrician is much more valuable when it comes to helping to determine what issues are really affecting the child. Ask the child's pediatrician to refer the child to the pediatric specialist, a pediatric neurologist, a pediatric psychologist, a pediatric ophthalmologist. They tried to give my son a label, and I said, hold up, hold up, hold up. I'm going to check out every physical thing that may be preventing him from doing his work correctly, as you say, or from not following instructions properly. And we did find out that my son had problems with his eyes when it came to adjusting from seeing at a distance and seeing close up, and vice versa. If I hadn't gone to a pediatric neurologist, I never would have known that. Don't rule out the need to test a child's blood level when there's a suggestion that the child has learning delays or might be classified as intellectual delay, because that blood test may tell you that that child actually has lead poisoning. If the child has sustained any head trauma or concussion, insist on an MRI. Those kids who are playing sports in school, you have to be particularly alert to those things. Get your doctor to write a report about any findings that she makes. Give your school district a report to include in your child's files. Teach parents how to fight for the child. Teach them the importance of being responsible by keeping records of all encounters with district staff, getting the name and title of whomever they speak to about the child, putting all requests in writing with the date of the request meeting, formal or informal hearings, etc. Be very conscientious about that. Follow up on phone conversations in an email or in a writing, any writing. If you have a phone conversation, don't let it end there. Follow up by asking in a writing, a text message even. Most of my parents nowadays, they use text messages all over the place. So you ask the teacher, did I get this right? Or did I understand that you said this? Am I correct? And to save those text messages. Some systems, the text message disappears after a certain period of time. You can download those text messages, print them out, create a file so that you know. This doesn't stop at the high school graduation. This continues until your child is on good footing to enter an institution of higher learning. If you miss any of these steps, if you miss this part, the parent missed this part of the learning process of fighting for that child, it may derail the child's opportunity to go to college. Make sure that no question, they understand that no question is a dumb question. Whoever says it probably can't answer the question, ask them anyway. Teach parents how to fight for the child. The district cannot simply refuse to evaluate the child. If the district refuses, insist on a written denial refusal statement from the director of pupil services, not from the teacher, the director of pupil services or the supervisor of special education. File a complaint with your Department of Education. In so many cases, the parents want us to just take over and fix it. We have to be at a point where we are saying to the parents, there are things you can do. There are opportunities that you have to begin the fight, to help us to continue it. But you, the parent, must begin the fight. Attach reports from your medical doctors, if there's any that helps that child. Seek an advocate, an advocacy organization, an attorney, whoever can provide you with additional guidance. But you have to come in here pulling out all of those parental instincts that you have to know that there is an opportunity for you to start the battle. After the district evaluates your child, make sure you get together, collaborate and cooperate with other organizations and other people. One person is a fruitcake. 2 people, a fruitcake and a friend. 3 people are troublemakers. 5 people, let's have a meeting. 10 people, we better listen. 25 people, our dear friends. 50 people equals a powerful organization. If you collaborate with other parents and organizations, you can make a difference. There's strength and power in numbers. Remember, you are not alone in these battles, and you are not, the parents are not distinct. We have to get them to be more vocal and more aggressive when it comes to fighting for their child. Let parents recognize their power to ensure that their child is assessed in all areas of suspected disability. Make sure that there is within the last 3 years, if your child's going to go on to an institution of higher education, within the last 3 years, you need a comprehensive evaluation so you can use that evaluation at the college level. I try to tell my parents, you don't need one this year, but in the next 2 years, go for it. Get that full comprehensive evaluation. And that way you will have what the university will be asking you to have. You will have an evaluation that documents that your child has a disability, and that document can be used to get you hooked up with the services for disability rights that students have. There's a disability advocacy organization on most college campuses pursuant to the ADA Section 504, not IDEA, but IDEA feeds into those other statutes if you prepare properly. Demand an independent educational evaluation if you disagree with any part of the evaluation that the district does. Don't just take it for, oh, well, they say what they say. I know who my child is. No, get somebody else to help you so that you really understand who your child is. Ensure that all disabilities are acknowledged in an official document. Ensure that they have an effective plan that provides their child with an appropriate education. preferably through the IEP process. In some cases, it's better to have a 504 plan in those last 2 years of K through 12 education. In those last 2 years, that 504 plan may be more helpful. So if your child has a disability like other health impaired or something like that, that you can say, okay, we've had enough of IDEA. We want to move over to a 504 plan. And for goodness sakes, teach the parents the ABCs of special education. IDEA, we've got letters there. We've got special ed there. A child is a child only once. And after those few years are gone, there is no second chance to make amends. In this respect, the consequences of unequal education the consequences have a terrible finality. Those who are denied cannot be made whole by a later act of government. Those who get the unfair edge cannot be later stripped of what they have won. And this is the most important thing to teach parents. I don't worry about the school. If I can teach the parents this, I have an ally in the parents as I continue to fight for them. Expectations matter. Expect growth, not failure. Traditional assessments are flawed. IQ tests reflect what a child is not able to do in that moment rather than what they are able to do with the appropriate supports and services in place. Presuming competence is the least dangerous assumption because the consequences are not as dangerous as the alternative. All students have the ability to learn and develop meaningful relationships. If education can raise you up, what happens to a child who's uneducated, undereducated, or miseducated?
Okay. Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome. Did I stay on time?
You are on time. And before I get to Mary, I just want to acknowledge we have a really good question from Hezzy Smith. And I'm going to get to it after Mary, but he on the basis of research he's done, points out a number of discriminatory activities or discriminatory practices that students with disabilities may face in higher education, including suspect admission criteria, not providing credits for completing programs, not providing a process when removing students with disabilities from their programs, and we could list more. We can maybe get to them, but I just want to make the point. When in the early days of public education, we faced somewhat the same issues. Remember, we used to call some of the inclusive programs play school. They're pretending to be education. The person is in the school or in the class, but treated very, very differently. In these same things happen. Barbara made an important point. In a very strict reading of the legal rights, we have a loss of rights upon graduation or upon leaving school, and a shifting to the ADA and 504 and the Office of Civil Rights for enforcement of those in higher education. Let's note that and see if there's something that can be done about that. And I'm going to just now go to Mary to give us her perspective on this issue.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion, which has been near and dear to my heart for a very, very long time. I think that what we have to do is look at schools in the sense of building capacity. Right now, what we have is the majority of students with disabilities, particularly the majority of students with significant disabilities, are not in inclusive settings. That law was passed in 1984. That is just a long time of denying kids rights. And so what we have to do is break the chains of segregation. We know that in 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education decision laid the foundation for recognizing that all kids must be able to be part of a regular school system. In fact, the decision uses the word that segregation retards the development of children, regardless of a disability label or not. It retards the development of children. So we have to recognize that that's really important. I think the other piece that's so important is that inclusion is a bigotry. It's a bigotry. It actually helps kids to understand how not to be bigots, how not to recognize that people with disabilities are so different that they should be treated differently. We have to move on. We have to move on all the time. We have to recognize, as Barbara said, the criterion of the least dangerous assumption is such an important concept. Everyone on the team must have high expectations. If we don't have high expectations, how are kids going to develop and grow? How are kids going to be given access to? And here's one of the amazing things I think about in relationship to the general education curriculum, that we've decided as a state, as a country, maybe it's even as a school district, that these are the kinds of skills that we expect TK kids to learn all the way through 12th grade. We expect all kids to learn this, but somehow we leave kids with disabilities out of it because their IEPs are limited to what they're learning. And often, as Tia said, it's limited to life skills rather than giving kids access to the core academic curriculum and being able to make the progress that they need to make. Children with disabilities will never have a future in inclusive communities, whether it's going to college, whether it's moving into a job, whether it's moving into a neighborhood, as we've already heard from our other panelists, unless they have the opportunity to learn the skills that everybody else learns. I mean, one of the best examples I can use is that most states, not every state, but most states have identified 4th grade as the state, as the grade in which you learn about your state. That's the social studies curriculum. So I'll take California because that's where I live, that in 4th grade, every 4th grader in California has California history. You learn about the missions, you learn all about the development of California, you learn about Yosemite when it's not on fire. You learn about all kinds of things that go on in the state. You learn what your state flower is, your state bird, blah, blah, blah. Often kids make a report to present to their class. If you're in a special education segregated classroom, typically you're going to have kids from 1st grade to 5th grade in the same classroom. So what does the teacher do? She teaches something that's somewhere in the middle, or it's somewhere in between, and kids miss out on that. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a group where relying upon my knowledge base about California history was important to contribute to a conversation, to understand where is Los Angeles in relationship to San Francisco? Where is it in relationship to San Diego? So in 4th grade, we're already denying kids when we don't give them the social studies curriculum from that particular state. So we need to make sure that we give kids those opportunities. Expectations so matter. We really, really have to provide kids with the opportunity to be part of. I'll never forget when my son was in 3rd grade, he was identified as having a disability, and we're at his first IEP meeting, and the IEP team said, well, so what kind of what kind of classroom should he go to next year? Because now he qualifies having a disability. And so I said to everybody on the team, which included the special ed director, the principal, all the psychologists and speech therapists, I said to the team, well, let's ask Nathan what he thinks. And here's what he had to say. I need to stay in 3rd grade because that's where my friends are and that's where I learn best. Now that particular statement gave him the opportunity to self-advocate in 3rd grade for his placement. I looked at the director of special ed. I said, he has spoken. Those are his words. That's how he feels. He doesn't want to go to a self-contained classroom. He wants to be part of his friends and be part of the school system. So it doesn't really matter how slow children are learning, as long as they're learning, as long as they've been given the support to grow and develop and learn. And you know, the truth is, the kind of truth that we don't often talk about. So if I were to give each of you on this panel, as well as the participants in this seminar or this workshop, if I were to give you a test about everything you presumably learned in K-12 or preschool through 12th grade, I suspect that most of us probably wouldn't pass it because we don't remember everything. There's no way we could remember everything that we were learning. But somehow non-disabled kids get a break because it's okay. It's expected that they're going to still go through school and they're going to graduate and perhaps go on to college. But for kids with disabilities, we all of a sudden say, oh no, but he doesn't have all of his letters down. He doesn't have all of his algebra down yet. So we can't move forward. We need to hold him back. And we need to make sure that we recognize the importance of moving forward, because all children learn. All children learn, and all children have opportunities to learn. We know that from the research, and this is some of the most frustrating testimony I give when I'm testifying on behalf of children in court, is that we have 50 years of best practice research. We have 50 years. They have nothing. There has never been studies published that actually say kids learn better in segregated settings. So why do we continue to operate segregated settings as our norm, as the way in which we typically offer services? We often bypass it. We see the kids labeled Down syndrome, autism, multiple disabilities. We're going to put them in a segregated classroom because after all, that's where they learn best. That's not true. That is so not true. And we have so much evidence to prove the contrary. So we need to move beyond and use our evidence. You know, research-based practices is a term used in the law. That is an important term. Research-based practices said we should all be educating children with disabilities in every setting that's available to non-disabled children. We know that kids have better academic skills, kids with and without disabilities, including kids without disabilities. If we provide the supports, that's a critical issue, that the IEP team actually recognizes that although this child has a disability, he may need some additional supports in the classroom. So let's give him those additional supports because they do have better academic skills. I also have seen research studies that have found that teachers are happier. If teachers are given the support that they need, they recognize that the kinds of strategies that a special ed teacher, an inclusion specialist uses can be effective with a lot of kids, including kids who are on the gifted and talented spectrum of the process. So we know that we have to make sure that we provide that. I think probably the most important aspect of the research is that we see better outcomes. For those kids who actually went through inclusive programming, we see better outcomes, like Tia, who's able to go to college. She's able to go to college because she was provided with some supports along the way. And so we need to make sure that we provide those opportunities so that students with disabilities, when they graduate, are prepared. They have the skills, they have the capacity to move on to higher education. And again, if we were to test every higher education student, they do not all have the same knowledge base. Surprise, surprise. We have a variability. So disability just brings another variability to the conversation. We need to make sure that we're using differentiated instruction, universal design. These are all strategies that are recognized as effective practices in inclusive settings. So we need to make sure that we're using all of these effective practices. The last thing I want to mention is, you know, Barbara, Frank, and I have been in this business a long, long time. We go way back. We have to recognize that although we have made some progress. We still have more progress to make. We still have to break down the barriers to schools that only offer segregated programming for students with disabilities. We have a lot of work to do. And again, I want to remind everybody that this law was passed in 1975. We've had plenty of time to actually get our act together. And we have so much wonderful research that can guide our act in building inclusive schools capacity. Our human family is complete when everyone is included. So that's the end of my formal remarks. And I'll just turn it back to Frank.
Right. Thanks, Mary, and thanks for the both enthusiasm and the caution. And Judy just put a note in the chat saying, for all those who find themselves in a position of having to testify or advocate in a way to bring forth that research, bring it forth as part of your what you bring. You can bring the whole experience of TASH to your testimony, to your advocacy, and Mary was not exaggerating, and it becomes a little bit frustrating when it's piled year on year on year on year. As I just said, in the 80s and 90s, and that's not giving enough credit to Mark Gold, okay? Before that, we knew, we had research that the expectations were really buried, and when we really opened up people, they could be productive, they could be independent. And that's why in the law, particularly in 2004, the Congress recited, they gave credit to that research base. And I said for a number of things, but for two things in particular. One is access to the general curriculum, participation in the general curriculum. And secondly, to pay attention to outcomes of the education in terms of employment, in terms of other post-secondary. Look at, we have gone from people being excluded to people graduating in bigger numbers from high school, from the curriculum. If they've been into the curriculum, then we showed they benefit from it. Okay, and
I think
that's where we have to go to this next step. And it's hard to do, but the formula is there: research, demonstration, training, advocacy, and if it comes to that, litigation, to get these other opportunities available. And so I'm just going to say again, I think there are two parts to that. One is more in our bailiwick, it's more in our park. That is really looking at transition, wondering why we just start looking at transition from an earlier point, building in higher expectations at an earlier point, so when it comes to the formal transition, this is not treated as not a possible opportunity. Second, which is a little bit more difficult, because Tia mentioned the vocational rehabilitation counselors. Okay, vocational rehabilitation supposed to have a seat at the transition table. It's supposed to be contributing. Okay, and one place they can contribute is in the financial burden that the higher education makes. So that goes to their whole system, and then what their expectations are. And the third thing, going back to Hesse's question, is let's look at the barriers. Some of those we can deal with by more preparation on our side, but some of those should be attacked. And the ability to enforce Title II or Title III, wherever, with private or public, in the higher education context is very, very hard. And it's hard because people get themselves in a situation where they don't have the supports, they're not doing well, they're failing, and then it comes to the question of what's reasonable accommodation and so forth. And if we don't get to that issue before, if there's not some good input from secondary school in terms of the types of supports, then it's going to be very difficult to deal with that. I don't want to end on a because I am optimistic if we look point by point. No, one of the required services, the law says in the required transition services, counseling for opportunities to higher education.
Yeah.
It says a lot of other things too,
Frank,
but that's required. And then there's the other services.
But Frank, you have to acknowledge that special education courses are not considered core courses by the NCAA. They're not considered core courses by some colleges and universities. And that's why I'm saying, you know, in those last 2 years, you really want your child to go to college, you better get them in the general education curriculum, because taking those special ed courses is like, if you want to go to college, can be a death knell.
Right. So that's the part of the work we've been doing. I mean, Barbara was fighting with the NCAA for 10 years, for God's sakes. And that whole, and that there's a lot of arbitrariness about college admissions, both around race and around other legacy things and so forth and so on. So that's a system where, but we can't shy away from that. But I think we have within our past the formula for moving this particular gap forward. And I'd encourage, I guess I'd encourage the kind of alliances that Tia talked about to start to make inroads into the universities. There are about 200 colleges that are doing some decent stuff now. And it's more on the demonstration level, I suppose, but we should take advantage of that and have that spread out, and perhaps have some requirements for higher education that are closer to what we have in public education for others.
And the high school counselors don't know about courses and colleges that offer those opportunities. They don't even use those things that are there, that exist there. And it's the parents' job. It's the parents' job. I keep coming back to the parents. They have got to not only take care of their own child, but make sure that that information is available to the school so that other children can have access to it.
Okay, I know we're going over time. One other point that I shouldn't be lost, Tia made it, and other people who are savvy should address it. That is the accommodation of virtual learning, remote learning, and how that can be, how that can make it facilitate success in higher education. I ran across one sort of it was actually a tip sheet. It said, what you should do. And one of the things that colleges are going to look at is behavior appropriate to university students. Now, that's an interesting concept, behavior at college, but there are certain ways that we learned in education that children who present with some difficulties that people don't know how to deal with can actually participate. Yeah. So, okay, Matt's going to get us out of this, but I'd like this to be continuing a discussion within TASH, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with this wonderful panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing. You have shared so much wisdom that you have acquired over the several years that you've been working in this field. I, for one, I'm a product of what could be done if everything was aligned properly. My parents had to fight constantly to get what I needed through my IEPs, and it was quite draining on them. And I was always frustrated because I was always treated differently too. And but what you guys mentioned, that if they're giving me appropriate supports along the way from pre-K all the way up to post-secondary education. It's everything works, and the fact that I manage the agency responsible for the EK compliance for the district government in Washington, D.C. should give you a clear indication that it works. And people have to believe that they should secure their rights during the education, because without my parents' support, without me really advocating for my own education curriculum, I wouldn't be in the same situation as I am today. So I want to thank Tia, Barbara, Mary, Frank, Laski for your leadership for the past 30, 40 years, and hopefully going forward, the pathway that you paved will be easier for other leaders wanting the same outcomes. But I realize that we still have a long way to go. But once again, thank you. I want to briefly summarize what this amazing event has meant to all of us. First of all, I want to thank everybody across this grateful nation for staying with us for the 4 hours of this event. I realized that we covered so many topics, well, 3 topics in general, but there was a widespread amount of information and wisdom shared that all of us could use going forward. One is that when it comes to community living, you need all the supports and to transition in the community. And if these supports are not there, everything fails. So if you don't have the service providers there present assisting person with a significant disability, that person's quality of life goes down dramatically. Plus, we should not be considered a drain on society. These supports improve the quality of life for everybody, not just for the person that needs the services, but if they can fully integrate and fully be part of the community, they will become productive citizens of that community, and that's what we want. We are constantly under attack in terms of our civic rights, in terms of voting. We should not take those rights for granted. They are on a very slippery slope. You can see it in our national news, in the state and local news, and it can also impact the Supreme Court. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have a civic duty under the United States Constitution to vote. Make a voice heard. Doesn't matter if you're in the minority, make your voice known, because it truly matters at the end of the day. Finally, education is what makes everybody's quality of life so much better. It sets the foundation of what's to come and impacts your health and human services that you need, it impacts your employment, it impacts your housing. It's a no joke. As a community, as professionals, as leaders, as advocates, we have a responsibility to support each other through this journey. We are not on an island. We need to come together and make everybody understand that we are here for business and we want to improve the quality of life for not only for ourselves, but for our families surrounding us. And so I want to really thank all the panelists and the moderators that came together. There was a lot of planning going into this event today. And I'm very proud that this event has been highly successful, but yet we're not done because we still need to honor the most important person that we're doing this event for, which is Mr. Lottman. And as a kind reminder, we should reconnect at 7 o'clock in honor of Mr. Lottman's work and his legacy that he's established even before he understood what it meant to everybody else going forward. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass over the mic to Mike. So thanks so much, you guys. You've been great. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.